And I remember playing Thurlan at one. Now, the simple motto was that, this is how simple it was with Simon. He says, the back four get the ball, give it to Jim or Ian, Ian and Jim gets it up to the boys up front. There's nothing complicated about that. Because as soon as you get the ball, give it to Jim or Ian, who's ever in space, give him it. Then it's up to them to get the game going.
There's a moment from 1967 that people who saw it still can't quite believe. Jim Baxter at Wembley, with the ball at his feet and England all around him, starts juggling. Not clearing it, not passing it, juggling it. Keepy-uppies against England on their own pitch. Scotland had already won, and Slim Jim wanted to make sure everyone knew it. I am Oliver, and this is Sport Icons. But here's what that image doesn't show you. Behind that arrogance, behind that slow-moving genius, there were men in this game whose entire purpose was to make sure players like Baxter paid for every single moment of joy they gave the crowd. Not with a bad result, with their legs. So who were they? Who did Jim Baxter himself name as the defenders he considered truly evil? Jim Baxter grew up in Hill of Beath, a mining village in Fife, and he carried that working-class toughness with him his whole life. But the way he played football looked like it came from somewhere else entirely. He didn't run, he glided. He didn't distribute the ball, he placed it, like a man setting down a cup of tea. By the time he joined Rangers in 1960 for a record fee, Scottish football already knew what it had. At his peak, Baxter was the kind of player who made opponents feel stupid just by standing near him. He was languid, almost bored-looking, and that drove defenders absolutely mad. Because you can't tackle a man who won't hurry. You can't pressure someone who genuinely doesn't seem to care. So, the hard men of that era stopped trying to outplay him, started trying to outlast him, to hurt him badly enough that he'd think twice before doing it again. And the era gave them permission. The 1960s and 1970s had almost no protection for creative players. Referees treated broken bones as an occupational hazard. Crowds cheered the reducer, and the men who delivered that kind of violence were considered assets, the kind of players managers built teams around. Baxter named 6 of them. Not with bitterness exactly, more like a soldier acknowledging the men who nearly killed him. This is that list. Ron Harris didn't earn his nickname by accident. Chelsea's defensive enforcer through the late 1960s and into the 1970s, Harris built his entire reputation on one very simple promise: if you embarrass me, I will make you regret it. And he had a particular gift for timing. The most dangerous thing about Harris wasn't how hard he tackled, it was when. He let you get the ball. He let you think you were past him. And then, once the ball was gone, you were mid-stride thinking about your next touch. That's when he arrived. Full weight, studs up, nothing accidental about it. The message was delivered. The next time you received the ball near Ron Harris, your body remembered that message before your brain did. Referees in that era watched it happen and put their notebooks away. This was football. This was what defenders did. Harris collected only a handful of bookings across a career that stretched over 700 appearances for Chelsea, which tells you everything about how differently the laws of the game were applied when the hard men were operating. What made Harris particularly effective was the patience. He wasn't a hothead. He didn't lunge recklessly. He was calculating, composed, and completely without mercy when the moment came. Baxter described men like Harris not as footballers, but as a different species of professional entirely. Someone who'd chosen a specific transaction. You try to play, I make sure you can't. Off the ball, Harris was watching. During set pieces, he was watching. In the tunnel before the match, he was already watching. Players didn't just face him for 90 minutes, they faced the idea of him from the moment the team sheets were read out. And that, according to Slim Jim, was the whole point. If Ron Harris operated in silence, Tommy Smith announced himself. Liverpool's Iron Man through the late 1960s and 1970s didn't wait for the game to start before the intimidation began. By the time the coin was tossed, he'd already told his opponent exactly what was coming. Bill Shankly, a man who coached some of the most technically gifted players in British football, once said that Smith wasn't born, he was quarried. Shankly said it with admiration. He wasn't apologizing for what Smith was. He was celebrating it. Smith's method was psychological before it was physical. He would identify the creative player on the other team, find him during the warm-up, and quietly explain which bone he intended to break and roughly when in the match it would happen. Not shouted, not performed for the crowd, said quietly, directly, with complete conviction. Because Smith wasn't trying to impress anyone, he was trying to plant a seed of doubt that would grow through 45 minutes until the moment came. And here's what made it so effective. He followed through. This wasn't pre-match theatre. Smith's tackles were surgical in their intent, timed not to win the ball, but to deliver a verdict. When he went in on someone, the aftermath told you everything about the purpose. Wingers who'd been destroyed by Smith didn't just limp off the pitch, they came back changed. Quieter, less willing to receive the ball in dangerous positions. The body remembers things the mind tries to forget. Baxter's read on Smith was precise. The most dangerous kind of opponent isn't the one who loses his head, it's the one who never loses it. Smith didn't tackle in anger. He tackled with the calm of a man completing a task he'd already planned. Nothing reactive, nothing emotional. Every piece of damage was a decision made in advance, which put it in a different category from hard defending, and much closer to something else entirely. Shankly built a dynasty at Liverpool, and Smith was one of the foundations. That tells you exactly how the game worked then. You don't get a nickname like that without earning it repeatedly, in public, in front of referees who decided not to care. Norman Hunter was the defensive anchor of the Leeds United side that Don Revie assembled in the late 1960s, a team built explicitly around the principle that talent alone doesn't win you anything if you're physically destroyed by half-time. Revie gave his defenders a mandate, and Hunter fulfilled it more completely than anyone. You saw skill, Hunter saw an invitation. A step over near the halfway line was enough. A piece of close control, a nutmeg, any gesture toward artistry in his vicinity, and Hunter would arrive with everything he had, not at the ball, but at the limbs that had dared to perform the trick. It wasn't reactive in the way a bad foul is reactive, it was more like a policy. Elegance in this part of the pitch costs you something. Hunter made sure the price was high enough to discourage future attempts. What separated him from a simply reckless player was the targeting. Hunter chose. He watched the game for the moments where a creative player revealed themselves, where someone's confidence brought them close enough, and then he acted on it. His teammates knew what he was doing. His manager knew. The entire First Division knew. The famous 1973 World Cup qualifying disaster against Poland, where a missed Hunter tackle in the final minutes allowed Domarski to score and sent England crashing out, gets remembered as an error. But watch it again. Even in the act of missing, Hunter's approach had the same controlled aggression baked into it. He committed fully, without hesitation. The intent was always the same. The outcome just didn't cooperate that once. Baxter understood Hunter the way you understand a natural force. There was no personal malice in what Hunter did, and that almost made it worse. He wasn't punishing you because he disliked you. He was punishing you because you were skillful, and he'd decided that needed addressing. In Hunter's world, the football pitch wasn't a stage for creative players. It was a place where creative players learned consequences. Hunter played over 700 games at Leeds. The message never changed. Every defender on this list so far was an opponent. Someone Baxter sized up from the opposite dugout. Someone he prepared for. Someone he knew was coming. Billy Bremner was different. Slim Jim knew this man. They shared a dressing room, a Scotland shirt, and by most accounts, a genuine friendship, which made what Bremner did on a football pitch even harder to reconcile. Bremner was nominally a midfielder, the kind of player who got credit for driving teams forward, for captaining Leeds United through their most feared years, for being the competitive heart of everything Revie built. But drop him into a defensive shape, and Bremner became something the game rarely produces, a small man who made large men deeply uncomfortable. Baxter put it simply. He called Bremner 10 stone of pure barbed wire. You can picture exactly what he meant. The thing about barbed wire is you don't always see it until you're already in it. Bremner had that quality. He could be right there with you, involved in the same passage of play, and then suddenly, the interaction had cost you something you didn't notice losing. A push in the ribs when the referee's head was turned. A word in your ear, timed to break your concentration at exactly the wrong second. An elbow that arrived just as you were about to receive the ball. None of it broadcast, all of it deliberate. His aggression didn't spike and fade the way some players does. It stayed constant, low level, and relentless across every minute of 90. You couldn't wait him out. You couldn't rattle him back, because rattling Bremner only made him more focused, not less. And unlike some of the others on this list, who chose a specific type of player to target, Bremner went for everyone. The star, the utility player, the young lad making his debut. It didn't matter. Everyone got the same treatment. Baxter acknowledged the dark irony of including him here. A man you'd have dinner with on international duty. a man who'd raise a glass to you after a Scotland win, the same man who, on a Saturday afternoon in a First Division fixture, would spend 90 minutes trying to dismantle you piece by piece. That gap between the person and the player, Baxter said, was one of the strangest things football ever showed him. Up to this point, every man on the list operated with some form of visible aggression. You could feel it coming. Bremner's relentlessness, Smith's pre-match declarations, Hunter's targeted brutality, all of them announced what they were in ways you could at least attempt to prepare for. Tarcisio Burgnich gave you nothing. The Italian defender was the structural cornerstone of Helenio Herrera's Inter Milan, the team that made Catenaccio infamous across Europe in the mid-1960s. That defensive system was already suffocating by design, built to compress space, deny rhythm, and drain the life from attacking football over 90 minutes. Within it, Burgnich was the human embodiment of the whole philosophy. He didn't chase you, he simply removed the distance between you until there was none left. What made him genuinely frightening wasn't pace or power, it was his proximity. Burgnich could follow a creative player for the entire match and never give them a clean touch, never surrender a yard, never allow the brief moment of separation that lets someone like Baxter produce something. And while he was that close, his elbows worked. Not wildly, not in ways that drew attention. Small, precise, applied to ribs and kidneys in the spaces between official scrutiny. Referees never saw it. It never appeared in the match reports. But the player on the receiving end felt every one. He marked Pelé in the 1970 World Cup final. Pelé scored. That fact gets used to measure how extraordinary Pelé was, which is fair. But it also tells you something about what Burgnich put him through to get there, and how that single moment of genius stood against a full match of systematic suffering. Baxter's read on Burgnich was the coldest verdict on this entire list. The others, in their own ways, had some emotion driving them. Bremner had fury, Smith had certainty, Harris had patience with an edge to it. Burgnich had nothing. No feeling toward you at all. He wasn't trying to hurt you because he disliked you or feared you. He simply had a job. And you were the job, and your comfort was completely beside the point. Every defender on this list had a method. Harris had timing, Smith had premeditation, Hunter had targeting, Burgnich had proximity, Claudio Gentile had a philosophy, and that distinction puts him in a category of his own. The Juventus defender operated by a principle he stated plainly and without embarrassment. Football is not for ballerinas. He didn't say it defensively, as though justifying something he knew was wrong. He said it the way a craftsman describes his trade. This was his understanding of the game, and he applied it with the consistency of a man who'd thought it through completely. The 1982 World Cup is where the world got the clearest view of what that philosophy looked like in practice. Argentina's Diego Maradona, already widely recognized as the most dangerous player on earth, came into that tournament as the central threat Italy needed to contain. Gentile was assigned the job. What followed across 90 minutes wasn't defending in any conventional sense. He fouled Maradona so repeatedly, so methodically, that FIFA counted 23 separate infringements in a single match. 23. He tore Maradona's jersey. He went through him, around him, and into him whenever the ball came near. Maradona, who had dismantled better defensive arrangements than this throughout his career, barely touched the ball. Italy won. Gentile wasn't sent off. He wasn't even particularly troubled by the referee. The era absorbed what he did, same way it absorbed everything else on this list, as acceptable practice, something within the understood boundaries of professional football. But here's what separated Gentile from all the others in Baxter's estimation. He didn't react to what opponents did. He prepared for it. Before matches, Gentile studied his assigned target, how they moved, where they liked to receive the ball, which foot they favored, what trick they reached for under pressure. Then he built a specific plan for dismantling that one person. Harris waited, Smith threatened, Hunter targeted skill in the moment. Gentile arrived having already completed the tactical work to take you apart before you touched the ball in the first minute. Baxter's verdict was unambiguous. Of every name on the list, Gentile was the most complete practitioner of evil defending he ever witnessed. Not because he was the most violent, some of the others had a rawer brutality, but because the violence was entirely calculated, nothing wasted, nothing accidental. everything in service of a plan that had been worked out in advance. That level of deliberateness, Slim Jim said, put Gentile beyond hard defending and into something that required a different word entirely. Baxter named these 6 men across different interviews and conversations over the years, and there's something worth sitting with in the way he talked about them. There was no rage in it, no score settling. He spoke about them the way you talk about men who shaped your life without intending to do you any favors, because that's exactly what they did. These defenders, and others like them, didn't just make individual careers harder. They forced the entire sport to reckon with what it was allowing. The rule changes that came through the 1980s and 1990s. The protection eventually extended to creative players. The red cards and bans that today make the specific cruelty of this era almost unimaginable. All of it traces back, at least partly, what men like these 6 made routine. Baxter's own broken leg in December 1964 came from a tackle in Vienna that ended his best years before he'd finished having them. He never blamed the Austrian player, but the injury happened in a game where tackles like that were expected, absorbed, and moved on from. His decline afterward, the drinking, the restlessness, the feeling that football had somehow left him behind, some of that started the night his leg broke. The men on this list didn't end the beautiful game, but they made it fight for its survival every single week. Jim Baxter left the world in 2001, and the game he loved buried him the way it buries most of its difficult stories, with a few minutes of applause and not nearly enough reflection. But the defenders he named, and what they did, tell you everything about how far football has travelled. Send some prayers for Slim Jim in the comments below, and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.